Community of communities. We are now being recorded. Let's see. We have today's agenda. City Council member spotlight. Darren Mono. Is Darren here today? I don't see him on my screen yet. Guess not. All righty. Then we will give him a moment and dive right into evolution of traffic calming. Laura, you are here. I saw you in a nice, pretty gazebo looking thing. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Certainly. How do you want to do it? You want to just take it away and start talking about traffic calming?
Sure. Absolutely. I believe, let's see. Yes, I have the option to share. So I'll share my screen in just a minute. So I think that I've met, I think most of you on this call before, but I'm Laura Handworker. I'm with the Salt Lake City Transportation Division. I'm a transportation planner. I've been with the city for a couple of years now. And I am the project manager on our Livable Streets program, which is the reboot of the former iteration of traffic calming in Salt Lake City. The last time that we had a fully funded traffic calming program was, I want to say, 2003. So it's been a minute. The city council allocated some funding for the transportation division to develop just a preliminary evaluation of what a new traffic calming program could look like in the city. And so that is what we have been doing for the last 6 months or so with a consultant, still kind of in the thick of it now, developing the program. And I will go through all the details with you. And I'll try and be pretty succinct, get you all the details you need without being too verbose, and then we can just kind of do a lot of back and forth. I'd love to hear your thoughts and get your questions, and we can talk about how to spread the news throughout all of your communities so we can get as much input as possible as we continue to develop. Ellen, the consultant is Farron Pierce, and there's a communications sub-consultant, and that is Summers Jaramillo. So Leah Jaramillo over there. Alrighty, so let's see if I can do this. All right. I don't have the prettiest presentation. I apologize. I'm not the graphics expert. All right. So just a quick background. As I mentioned, this is a couple of years in the making, just doing this preliminary evaluation of how to reevaluate traffic calming throughout the city. And the main goal, as we decided on it for this go around, it's a little different from the previous iteration of traffic calming. So in the past, the way that traffic calming was handled was on a request basis throughout the city. And there wasn't a ton of funding for the program. And so where that available funding did go was to neighborhoods where folks know how to communicate with the city, how to ask for what they want, which is great and empowering, but it also leaves some neighborhoods behind who aren't necessarily comfortable with or don't know how to interact with the city, or who to get in touch with to figure out how to address some of their problems. And so we really wanted this to be a holistic citywide approach, where we can improve the overall safety, livability, and attractiveness of our neighborhood streets throughout the city. And as I said, this phase of the program was just to kind of develop the plan for moving forward. We do not have funding secured for implementation yet, so the actual implementation of the program will be dependent on future funding. So just a little bit more about the goals of the program. We really want there to be a higher level of collaboration and trust between city staff and our residents. We want it to be really open communication. We want it to be easy for residents to communicate their issues with us. And we want to take individual neighborhood concerns into consideration as we develop actual traffic calming treatments for various streets during the implementation phase. And we also really wanted the prioritization of funding to be done in a really transparent and data-driven manner. So again, we wanted to go away from just solely being request-based. And we also did not want to end up in a situation where neighbors are basically pitted against neighbors for funding, you know, kind of avoiding the, well, my neighbor, we're a grid system, right? And so my neighbor one street over, they got traffic calming. And so now everyone is speeding down my street instead. And so that was something that we're trying to get away from. So instead of doing it as a street by street approach, we have divided the city up into a series of what we're calling traffic calming zones. So implementation will be done on more of a neighborhood basis than a street by street basis to hopefully get away. We're not trying to push traffic around from street to street. Really, the goal of the program is to make each individual street more livable. And so that's what we're hoping we can achieve by approaching it from a neighborhood basis. And the streets that are included in the program under the selection criteria heading here, obviously city-owned streets, we can't touch UDOT. Any streets that have a 30 mph or less posted speed limit and are 3 lanes or narrower. And so the reason for those two is that in, you know, the sense of traffic calming and the way that we're looking at it, it is for these lower throughput, lower speed, not solely residential. It doesn't, I mean, like we're considering some downtown neighborhood, anywhere where people are living. So we're not looking at, you know, industrial neighborhoods or kind of like the International Business Center, you know, out by the airport, that sort of stuff. But any sort of residential component. And again, with the 3 lanes or narrower, the reason that we're not including any higher volume streets is that the traditional traffic calming, the physical infrastructure doesn't make sense for larger streets. Like you can't go onto a 4-lane road and put down a couple speed bumps and have that be super effective. And so anything that's not a part of this program that would need to see an element of traffic calming or would need to see slower speeds would be, you know, you all know that we have so many projects going on in transportation. And so there's a lot of different, like the first one that pops to my mind, just because it's close to where I live, 21st South, you know, that's not something that would be included in this program because it is 4 lanes, but it's something that we're looking at through other projects. And so that would be the case for a lot of other of those larger volume streets. And yeah, so again, I mean, not part of a funded and scheduled upcoming transportation project. So we're not quite to the point of publishing our map of the final streets that are included. We're getting really close. But when you see that, you might wonder why some streets aren't included on there. And so it would just be any number of these things. Maybe it's maintained by Parks and Public Lands, or maybe it's just a different transportation project. And so we're working on making that really clear and helping people understand, like, if their street isn't on there, maybe it is a part of an upcoming transportation project. So just trying to figure out how to make that clear before we just put it out there, because we don't want to upset anyone. Okay, so generally the timeline, and you can tell I've made a couple of edits to this slide because, as always, projects take a couple of months longer than you think they're going to. We have completed the division of the traffic calming zones that I mentioned and the selection of the candidate streets that are included. We are currently in number 2, developing our prioritization process, which I'll go into in a second on the next slide. And we're also working on developing a public survey. And so hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have made more progress on both of those things, and we'll have a survey live fairly soon. And we are also working on creating a more full community outreach plan for the implementation phase. So again, not part of this project, but we're going ahead and kind of teeing up those materials, getting all of our templates ready, ensuring that we have a good plan in place for when we do move forward. So we're doing a pretty simple public survey at this point. And then whenever the project is funded and we move into implementation, that's when the engagement process would look a lot like any of our other transportation projects, where we spend a lot of time with that specific community and really doing a back and forth on what specific treatments they would want to see. So we're not getting into that level of detail right now, but we're getting the materials ready, getting that process ready at this point so we can have it moving forward. And then another thing that the consultant is doing for us is we have an existing traffic calming toolbox from the previous iteration of the program, again from 2003, that has a list of all of the different traffic calming infrastructure that was considered during that phase or that program, figuring out if the landscape of Salt Lake City has changed enough that we need to make significant changes to that. That document had some price points in there that are obviously going to be pretty out of date. So we're going to try to update those a little bit so we have a better idea of what different treatments would cost. And the consultant is also going to do some research for us to try and identify, innovative funding mechanisms for implementation, because any sort of infrastructure project, it's going to be pricey. And so rather than having this be like a 50-year program, where it takes us forever to get through the entire city, we wanted to see if there were any sort of innovative ways that we could try and knock it out more quickly than that. So they're just going to be doing some research for us there that we can hopefully, bring to council and have some conversations at that level. Okay, so the prioritization process that I mentioned, we have divided up the city into about, I think it's a little over 100 zones at this point. And it's the process, the prioritization that we're trying to create is prioritizing those 100 or so zones. And the two main categories from which we're looking are safety and equity. And those two align with, if any of you have heard from my colleague, Joe Taylor, he is working on we're calling it the QTIP program, Quality Transportation Improvement Program or Plan, one of the Ps. And so he has various buckets for the prioritization process in that program, and safety and equity are two of those. And so we're kind of trying to parallel, but at a much more simplified level. We're trying to make our process really easy to explain, easy for our residents to understand the metrics that were pulled in, how this decision was made. Again, just trying to keep it transparent and really data driven. And so from the safety side, some of the things that we're drawing in, and again, we're still kind of finalizing this at this point, and we'll have that published in the future. Number of crashes with a higher prioritization on pedestrian and bicycles. And we also got some vehicle speed data that we're using. So kind of using the delta between posted speeds and recorded speeds. So factoring that into safety. And then also drawing in proximity to community assets like schools and parks and community centers. So where people might be traveling to, especially on foot or bicycle. And then also factoring in on the equity side, poverty, minority, zero car households, those sorts of things. And this all, again, parallels what our other prioritization process within the transportation division is using. And I just really quickly, so on our website, or we have a Livable Streets website, and I'll have to share that with you. I realized I didn't put a link down here. But we have a comment box. So outside of this public survey process, we're open to receiving comments at any point. And I find it to be really valuable for people to just be able to tell us some specifics about exactly what's happening in their neighborhoods, on their streets. And it just, provides some more context and helps really frame this process. I won't read all of these verbatim, and I'm happy to email this presentation out afterwards if desired. But these are some of the things that we've gotten. 10th West needs a median and raised crosswalks. And something that I thought was really interesting was saying that the area has not been prioritized in the past, and it needs to be put towards the top of the list. And so, that's sort of a conversation that we've been having internally. Do we want to try to prioritize these areas that have maybe received less funding in the past and bring them up to this kind of baseline, or do we just want to spread everything equally around the city as we move forward? So that's one of the policy discussions that we've been having. And yeah, there are some comments where folks are within areas that are going to be a part of other transportation projects, which works out well for them. And so I just wanted to provide this one as an example of, so 8th East, we have a neighborhood byway project that is going to be constructed there in another couple of years. And so folks really want traffic calming there, but this street, 8th East between 9th and 13th South, won't actually show up on our list of livable streets because it's part of a funded and upcoming transportation project. So this is an example of one of those things where it's like, why isn't that street included? And this is why. And yeah, residents in Liberty Wells don't feel safe. There are concerns that the city isn't currently operating these streets the way the master plan intends, managing local streets for slow and safe speeds, and some critiques about previous traffic calming implementation, like on 5th East, south of 17th, the raised crosswalk that doesn't really feel like a raised crosswalk. And yeah, again, west of downtown, constantly people driving way above speeds, and people running stop signs. And so I think that that's really interesting, because, folks will, I think that it's really easy to think that just putting a bunch of stop signs in can solve some problems. And I think that that's a good reminder that we might need to have some more innovative solutions to make sure that we're really, really slowing people down, and not allowing them to just, use stop signs as suggestions. Okay, so I think that's enough talking from me for for right now. If we want to go into taking some questions, any discussion, happy to take this conversation wherever you want. And I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see all of your faces. Looks like Amy has a hand raised if you want to go.
Hey, thanks, Laura. I was just curious. I feel like this is a newer phenomenon. I feel like there are two different kinds of traffic calming that I'm aware of being concerned about in the city. There's the sort of more typical going like 40 in a 20 zone. And then there's like the late night speed racing that a lot of us can hear in our homes. Are there two distinctly different sets of strategies to take towards that?
I mean, that's a good question, and I think that my gut reaction to that, with the caveat that I'm not an engineer, is that we would hope that whatever infrastructure we're putting in would slow any of those people down. Like if we have effective traffic calming, it'll slow people down from 40 to 20, but it'll also prevent people from just going at completely unreasonable speeds during any hour, even when there's not other vehicles around. And so that's, I mean, that's kind of what I'm hoping to see from this new updated toolbox, as the consultant starts to evaluate those from the lens of a traffic engineer, how to ensure that it's basically we really need to design our roads so that it's impossible to go those unreasonable speeds. And so that's, kind of what I'm hoping we can see from this project.
The police department did request a funding for some steel plates that are supposed to reduce the racing aspect. And I definitely wrote it down as a question on how exactly does that steel plate do it. So I'll look more into exactly how those work, but there is definitely something that we can put down as a temporary feature to limit the racing in spaces where that's occurring.
Thanks, Dennis. I have that same interest in those metal plates because I feel like they're
magic.
Well, I feel like they're supposed to be temporarily deployed on purpose,
Yes.
for like understanding that street racing might move around the city as we put in these great permanent traffic calming features.
Here's hoping.
Yeah.
Well, and that actually,
kind of. It would be great if it just vanished, but
that reminded me of something that I meant to mention. Is that kind of, to prevent this from being just a long, dragged out process where some neighborhoods don't see any improvements for years and years. We are considering sort of a semi-permanent citywide implementation before moving into like a permanent, higher cost, more attractive upgrades. So not totally sure what that would look like, but it is something that we're considering from a cost effectiveness standpoint and an ease of implementation standpoint to just try and roll semi-permanent measures out in as many places as possible. Almost like a phase 1 and a phase 2 is kind of what we're maybe trying to do, and details TBD. But from our conversations with community members and council members, it's a concern all across the city, and so we don't want to leave anybody high and dry. And so if there's a way to kind of do a baseline, and we don't want to be redoing work. So again, trying to create something that we can build off of rather than we are, redoing. Dig once approach is kind of what the way that we try to go, not be wasteful with city funds. And if that makes sense. I feel like I didn't explain that very well, but probably because we're still working out the details, but that's kind of what we're hoping to do.
So Laura, I have a question. I know the city council approved $100,000 for the study. My understanding is there's no money in the current budget for a livable streets program this current year, nothing that's been put in. So how long before something actually starts showing up on our streets that will make a difference?
Yeah, you're correct that there isn't anything in the current budget. We're hoping to wrap up this program, or our development right now, by the end of July, and then going to council maybe sometime in August or September, just to start having these discussions, the policy discussions about how they would want to fund it. And then that could be considered, through maybe a future budget amendment, if we wanted to get there as quickly as possible. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do now, is just to start having specific budget discussions with council maybe later this summer.
So
Well,
Laura,
I hope, a city council member might listen in on that and hopefully act on it when it comes.
yeah. So is the $100,000 is funding for the Livable Streets program in the current proposed budget?
No.
Not at all. Okay.
There's nothing in the budget for livable streets, is my understanding.
When you said current budget, I wasn't sure if you were talking about the current fiscal year that we're in, or if we're talking about the current proposed budget that will take place for the next.
The proposed budget that's coming before the council now.
Okay. Then yeah, somebody should change that. Let's see. Anybody else? Come on. You guys have had some chance to drink some coffee here while Laura spoke. Brian, you've got a finger raised.
Hi, yeah, I'm Brian Hutchinson. I'm from Capitol Hill.
Welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate this effort. This is a lot of eyes on this one, because the entire city, in fact, the entire country and other countries are saddled with this issue. And I'm sitting in Michigan today, in Detroit, which is not known for having healthy budgets, as many may be aware, has spent $11 million to acquire 4,500 urethane speed humps, the trapezoidal section speed humps, and it's a very big city, much bigger than Salt Lake. It's probably even bigger than Salt Lake County. But they see many advantages. One is in mitigating or to put suppressing gang activity, because getaways are difficult when you're racing your lowrider through speed humps. But there are many advantages. Laura, is you spoke of phase one as semi-permanent solutions. We've been looking at these and hoping to acquire a few to test the geometry and the performance. Is this on the radar? The Detroit's study, is that, are you watching the performance of their program?
No, I wasn't familiar with that one, Brian. I would definitely have to look into it. You know, I am certainly not opposed to us looking into something of that method, especially for this sort of phase one. I personally, I mean, you know, you never know what's going to happen in terms of funding that we get, what we actually end up being able to do. My grand dreams, my pipe dreams for this program is that it really ends up being livable, you know, and speed bumps are great at slowing down traffic. I would really hope that we could provide neighborhoods with more. And, you know, I'm trying to kind of collaborate with even our public utilities division. Can we work in like green infrastructure to, you know, so again, pipe dreams. But that's a great, that sounds like a really good project to keep an eye on, and yeah, see how that ends up working. So I'll definitely make sure that I look into it. I'll get it on the consultant's radar as well as they're doing their research for the toolbox. So thanks.
Thank you. I should say Kyle Cook had a connection with one company. He was trying to get a couple samples sent our way, and but then, you know, Kyle's been busy as well. So.
Oh yeah, Kyle's very busy.
Okay.
He's great. He's on top of it.
Hey, Laura,
Yeah.
Landon had a question in the chat regarding Sweet Streets, an organization getting more and more active in our communities, reaching out to each of us. Is there any collaboration? How do you guys differ?
They haven't reached out to me. So
Okay.
there isn't any. I'm
Fair enough.
happy to chat
Not
with anyone,
yet.
happy to collaborate with anyone. So let
Okay.
them know. I'm I'm here. I'm available.
Weston, I see your hand.
I just wanted to mention that Sweet Streets, Taylor Anderson, who I think collaborates with Sweet Streets, I'm not sure what his role is with that, with the organization, reached out because they are doing an initiative regarding lowering neighborhood streets speed limit down. And I talked with John, and he's you know, interested in collaborating on that and is very open to that idea. It sounds like there might be we might be a little bit out of sync though with Sweet Streets wanting to sort of launch that campaign now, and then just sort of our process with Livable Streets that Laura was just talking about. So, but definitely it sounds like there's a lot of conversation and talk between Sweet Streets and at least John or off and on.
Yeah, John had mentioned that, you know, lowering our speed limit, our residential default speed limit, would be the easiest, quickest thing to do citywide. I wasn't aware that he had been talking to Sweet Streets about it, but that is, you know, it's a sign. Some people will pay attention to it, some people won't. But I mean, as a very, very first step, it's definitely something that we would be open to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to just wanted to be clear. I don't know how much they're talking about it. I just think that it has come up, and Taylor reached out to me, and so I reached out to John just to see where he was at, and John just said, you know, sort of to Lara's point, it is just a sign, right? So a lot of it is like an education campaign, and so I think it was John's hope that maybe Sweet Streets would consider. Even if they launch it now, there may be an idea to relaunch it or to talk about it again when Livable Streets is funded and allowed, so that way they can kind of work in tandem rather than doing its own thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a school of thought that signs frankly mean nothing. It's the design of the street that is going to intuitively control speeds. So, and I'm a fan of that. I think we've got to be able to design streets that people naturally slow down on. So hopefully we can get to that. David, what's up?
Well, we have this mantra: education, engineering, enforcement. The three kind of legs of the stool to for traffic calming. We're talking about here the engineering part, which is critical, but we can't overlook the enforcement aspect. And of course, this is not Laura's bailiwick. But for example, lowering the citywide speed limit gives the police grounds for issuing citations. In our neighborhood, we've been a bit frustrated with the lack of enforcement, and we've been told repeatedly that the police department doesn't have sufficient resources, meaning cops on the beat, to enforce our laws. That seems problematic to me. But with the best engineering and education of drivers to be observant of conditions in neighborhoods, we really do need effective enforcement. And I'd like to know, on the city level, is there any awareness of this lack of traffic enforcement, and is there anything that can be done about it?
There's certainly a awareness of a lack of police department resources. Sorry, Laura, you were going.
No, you're totally fine. I was just gonna say it's definitely something that we hear pretty consistently from various neighborhoods. I will say, just to provide a counter opinion or perspective. I mean, one, even with stepped up, if there was the ability to have the stepped up enforcement, it's still, it doesn't encompass everything, right? I mean, if you can't have cops on every corner all the time. And on the other hand, there are a lot of communities and programs like the Safe Routes to School had a couple other, they had, I think, maybe five E's. I don't remember what they all were, but they ended up removing enforcement from their approach to safe streets, because enforcement by police officers provides more opportunities for conflict, in terms of, having armed police officers, and particularly, vulnerable communities who have had unsafe encounters with police officers. And so it just relying on the police force to do our traffic enforcement doesn't make everyone feel safe. And so we want to make sure that as we're developing safe streets, it takes all communities and all perspectives, and any point where we can reduce the potential for conflict between residents and police officers, we want to do that. So we're really focusing on it, again, from the engineering side. And yeah, we are the transportation division. We're not the police department. But that's just, another perspective to look at it from. What makes some of us feel safe in terms of enforcement may make some other people really feel a lot more unsafe. So, it's a complex issue.
And to that end, right now, there are proposals in front of the council regarding an unarmed traffic enforcement force. So we could hopefully make it more safe, but for everyone, so that you don't get shot when you get pulled over, but also that traffic laws do get enforced so that we drive slower in the neighborhoods. Brian Hutchinson.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so on this point, we felt that enforcement is the last option. We'd certainly like to engineer it, but the education part is something that the city is really good at, and it has the capability to spread the word through institutions, schools, research park, and that's something we're working with Staker Parson. We have a meeting with them in about a month to go through educating the drivers on driver safety and the rules, et cetera. So what does a city, is this going to be, if we were expecting an education component to to be designed and implemented. Is that Laura? Is that part of Livable Streets, or is that a different department, or how's this work?
It hasn't been factored into the program at this point, Brian. But I mean, I agree that it is pretty important. It would probably have to be fairly collaborative with other departments. I could see maybe, I don't know, our sustainability department, who's going around to every house with the trash can out, right? Like maybe that's something where we could get them to stick flyers everywhere. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud right now. But I mean, yeah, definitely. I think collaborating with other departments, even like signage in our parks where most people go. I mean, community centers. I think it could. There's definitely potential, and it would probably be. It'll be during a later phase. It won't be during this phase with the consultant that we have under contract right now, because we're trying to wrap that up within the next couple of months. But no, I mean, I think that's a really great point. Education is a big part of it, and especially if we can maybe collaborate with, again, like the Safe Routes to School folks, just starting at a young age, teaching people that, cars are large, and, you really need to have that level of responsibility if you're behind the wheel of one. So it'll be a good conversation to have. So that's a good point.
Is that something Taylor Anderson's group, Sweet Streets, they're providing a bit of a educational aspect to this, and I'm wondering if that can be coordinated.
Yeah, I'm sure it could. Sounds like I need to talk to them. Libby. You're muted. Oh, there we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Back to the enforcement, I just had a question. I am not very interested in seeing more police out with guns issuing tickets. But aren't there cameras that can record higher speed and automatically issue tickets?
Our state does not allow that.
First,
state legislature. Was there someone? Sorry, I feel like I was talking over someone. Ellen, maybe?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
There is Craig Timothy was the gentleman that did traffic calming up to 2003. And out of his toolbox, which is the traffic calming toolbox, which I'm sure is still the same, is a thing called the pace car. And we put responsibility on the driver. I don't hear anybody talking about the driver has the responsibility to slow the traffic down. Nobody's going to go faster than you're going if you're in front of their car. So if you're the pace car for that road, you go the proper speed limit, and everybody behind you has to go too. So we have to make, in this program, we have to bring out the driver accountability. Quit complaining about how fast everybody's going, and you go the speed limit. We don't do that nearly enough, or we'll put all kinds of traffic coming on a road and say, okay, this road is safe. It's not safe if the driver isn't driving safely. So I would like to see a huge emphasis on you're responsible, this is your community, and you drive the speed limit, and it's your obligation to make your area, whatever street you're on, as safe as possible. Thanks.
That's definitely a part of it. And we would always hope that everyone would be driving safe on their streets. But I mean, the fact of the matter is sometimes there are folks out there driving super fast and there's no good driver in front of them to slow them down. So we really want to make sure that we're designing our roads so that people can't go fast, as much as we want driver responsibility to always take precedence. It doesn't in reality. So hopefully both of those will, I would love to influence more people to drive safely, but we also just want to force them to through infrastructure. So
Libby?
Maybe we should put pressure on the legislature, because I think that's a little behind the times when the legislature is more willing to issue or fund police with guns rather than cameras issuing tickets. Maybe that should be addressed with the legislature.
I recall correctly, the legislature only very recently reinforced the no cameras part. And I don't know that they've shown a willingness to be particularly responsive to the concerns that you're expressing, Libby. I agree with you. It'd be nice, but we'll have to keep up on that, see what we can do. All righty. Anybody else? Last question. Paul, how are things in Central Ninth?
Quiet this morning, so that's nice. So I have a question. I listened to all this conversation and I just really wonder how do we achieve the goals of livable streets when the city is not willing to do traffic impediments, speed bumps, raised crosswalks, and sounds like nobody wants to do any enforcement. So how do you hold people accountable if there's no enforcement? How do you slow people down if there's not an impediment? So I think everybody wants speed bumps. I see them in the suburbs and new subdivisions. So I know that they can be built in communities and be just fine and work with snowplows. But Salt Lake City seems to have a zero tolerance towards traffic calming measures like that. So how do you redesign a street without an impediment that slows traffic?
Well, that may have been the approach in the past. I heard that with the last iteration of traffic calming, the division would put speed bumps in, and then they, made enough noise that, speaking of noise. Okay. That residents would request for them to be taken back out. But I don't think that we're really approaching it from that standpoint anymore. At least in my conversations with John, we're totally open to putting speed bumps down. And again, it's neighborhood by neighborhood. Once we get to the actual implementation phase, just discussing with neighborhoods what they would want to see. And if community is all in favor of speed bumps, then that's definitely something that we would consider. So it's not, at least from the transportation division perspective, we will obviously have to collaborate very closely with our fire department, and we're kind of, when we get to the point of putting out the map of livable streets, candidate streets, we're gonna kind of have fire routes in a different color, that saying they're still a part of the program. It will require extra collaboration, because like you said, there are cities who make it work. Every city has their fire departments, not every city, but most cities have snowplows. And so it's, there are ways to make it work. And so we're definitely gonna get as innovative as possible and make sure that we can, sorry again about the noise. Yeah, we're not anti vertical treatments by any means, so.
Great. I volunteer Central Ninth as tribute for that, so.
Do be careful what you wish for. There are neighborhoods who have gotten speed bumps and then want them taken out because they do create noise.
Yeah.
When people don't slow down and they kind of ram into them with some speed. And then I also think it's important to point out, Paul, that I don't think there's a lack of desire to enforce. It's a lack of resources.
Sure.
And I would love for you to voice your opinion to the council and let them know that funding the police department at the mayor's recommendation would be helpful in making some change there.
Councilmember Ferris, please fund that. Also, one last thing, and I know we need to move off this topic, but Laura, is there any consideration for alleyways being included in some of this? We're having problems with people are starting to really fly through the alleyways in Central Ninth. So I think that alleyway speed issues are something that the city is going to have to think about.
Yeah, I guess I would have to look at the map. If they're considered, if they're city owned, then there's a good chance that they are. If they're private alleyways, then they probably weren't included in our list. So I would have to look into that and get back to you on that, Paul.
Okay, thank you.
I would have thought the lack of maintenance of any and all alleyways would have impeded the traffic flow there anyway.
I will say that alleyways are going to be a big part of our upcoming transportation master plan, which my colleague Joe Taylor is working on and has just started to kick off. So that's going to be about a 2-year process. But we're definitely considering alleyways to be a city asset, and looking to improve those in the future. So.
All righty. Well, here we are coming close to 10 a.m. So any other last questions? We're good. Okay, Laura, thank you very much for coming and sharing your knowledge and giving us a bright spot on the horizon, I think, to look forward to for actually having livable streets, things we can work on and drive slowly on.
Well, thanks for having me. I am gonna email Jasmine the little presentation I had, and I'll include all my contact info and everything. So reach out anytime.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All righty. Everybody else, any last questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Feel free to reach out to us at any time at Salt Lake Community Network. Let us know what issues you're experiencing or you might need help with. We have certainly spoken to some of you recently regarding fiscal sponsorship in the event of working with receiving a grant, so we can help you basically get on your own feet and have your 501c3 status set up and guide the way for you to help hold your hand through those processes. And of course, in every other aspect, just want to be able to, like we say in our mission statement, empower and enable each of you to fight the good fight for the sake of your neighborhood. So on that note, I do want to share, because I have to share this. Yesterday was my very first day as representing District 2 on the city council. So my family, of course, spent the time, yes, watching me on TV, but apparently having fun with it. So they created this little meme for me. Apparently I looked like Jiminy Cricket yesterday. So anyway, thank you all very much and have a good morning.
Thanks, Dennis.